Hello and welcome to AdaPulse, the community-funded news channel, keeping you up to date with all the news and emerging projects that are in and around the Cardano ecosystem. And we've got a great in-depth article for you today as we discuss why Charles Hoskinson built Cardano, and as Charles titled the white paper himself, a subjective approach. And this is by my veteran teammate, Libeline, who's done a whole host of technical articles in the past, and we really get our money's worth out of him today as we discuss what is a white paper versus a manifesto, Charles's motivation, tokenomics, technology, but also privacy and, of course, decentralization. So do remember to click the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell button for the notifications, and share far and wide. We want to educate as many people as possible. But I am Josh from ATM Stake Pools, the presenter for AdaPulse for today. Let's just crack straight on with the article then, shall we? So in this article today, what Libeline's done is an analysis on the philosophy and inspiration behind the Cardano blockchain. And this is all based on the original essay published June 28th, 2017 by Charles Hoskinson, its co-founder, obviously. So here's the document in its original format. Well, I'll put a link to it in the description below. But I've also got the standardized IOHK document, which will also be down below for you. But essentially, the document contains 6 sections. So you've got your introduction, science and engineering, interoperability, regulation, sustainability, and conclusion. However, today we're going to sort of group some of the main statements that are sort of throughout the document in order for you to sort of get a general idea of what it's about. Because, it's common for blockchains to have a white paper, but some also have a manifesto, as you can see here, such as Ergo or the Cypherpunk's manifesto. So is this document a white paper or a manifesto? So stay till the end to hear our conclusion on that. But first, let's define each one. Does Cardano have a white paper? Now, a white paper is a technical document that explains in depth the development of a product that offers a solution. And it can have original research or compiled research from other places. And the aim is basically promoting a product in the market. Now, a manifesto is a public declaration of principles and intentions. So it's often of a political or artistic nature, and it basically, includes the philosophies they're following with the declarations and doctrines, purposes, or programs, essentially what they plan to do. So in the UK, you often hear of the Conservative Party manifesto or the Labour Party manifesto, and they're basically laying out what they plan to do. But with this essay written by Charles, it seems to contain a bit of both without defining himself as one of them in particular. Now, he says here, Cardano did not start with a complete roadmap or even a white paper, but instead it opted a collection of design principles and engineering best practices, including probably one of the most notable, the separation of accounting and computing into different layers with modular components and with peer-reviewed development. Now, before we continue dissecting this, but I guess what we really need to understand is his motivation. Hoskinson's motivation. So the goal, Charles says, is not to propose a totally new way of developing software and protocols, but to recognize that great software and protocols already exist and that we can mimic the conditions that led to their creation. And second, make these conditions public knowledge and open source if you can, so that they can be imitated for the benefit of the entire industry. Now, the essay considers cryptocurrencies as prime example of the social component of money, since much of the value is derived from your community. The way it uses the currency and its level of involvement in the evolution of the currency. So a cryptocurrency is more than the sum of its protocols, source code, utility, and it's ultimately a social system that inspires, empowers, and connects people. Now, it proposes a long-term vision on how to improve the design of cryptocurrencies, so that they can work on mobile devices with a reasonable and secure user experience, but also with the possibility of accounting for multiple assets in the same ledger, which clearly refers to, the management of native tokens like NFTs, which we know are pretty easy to mint. But Charles begins the presentation of the document by citing that the Cardano project began in 2015, and the general approach is to provide a best balance and sustainable ecosystem that best responds to the needs of its users. The tokenomics. So now if you check this image here, you can see that the Cardano blockchain started on the 23rd of September 2017 at 21:44 hours and 51 seconds. And you can see the Genesis block in Epoch 0 of 31 billion ADA being minted. Or if you want to put it, 69% of the total supply. Now, I've found this other pie chart here that refers to some of that allocation, because you've got around 2.4 billion ADA being allocated to IOHK, and another 2 billion ADA being allocated to Ergo, with 648 million being given to the Cardano Foundation. And so that represents around 12% of the total supply that will be minted over time. Now, it brings me into this image, and it's an important one because we want to emphasize here. It mentions ADA, and ADA is actually only mentioned once in the entire document. And so here it's talking about the initial distribution, which is through a token generating event to buyers from all over Asia, and they were then able to sell it in the secondary market. I mean, there were critical voices to this. Not everyone was happy about that. So then IOHK removed this sort of transparency from their website. But you can see it here in the Internet Archives, Genesis block distribution. So, we're not just making this stuff up. For the sustainability of development, the plan is to have a decentralized financing mechanism for future work. But as far as our understanding goes, that is, the teams that work on the protocol, mentioning that any user may be eligible to request funds from a trust through a voting system, and the inclusion of a formal sort of blockchain-based system for proposing and voting for sort of soft and hard forks. So that's why he mentions the need of like a treasury, which is essentially a decentralized trust. So financed by a load of ADA that's chucked at them, and the ongoing transaction fees that are accrued. So this is Sex Explorer right now. So obviously you can see that the treasury was created, and it has 1.22 billion ADA in it, which, as you can see, represents 2.7% of the total supply. Now, this treasury also funds the Catalyst project for particular projects on the Cardano blockchain as well. So don't forget that. The regulations. Now, Charles considered the inclusion of optional metadata important in order to best fit the sort of legacy systems that we have at the moment. Because it's not enough to know just how much value is being moved between accounts, because regulations often require like stakeholder attribution, compliance information, suspicious activity reports, and other sort of records and whatever. So Cardano recognizes that users may need or be legally required to share transactional metadata with certain actors, such as like tax authorities. But they also believe that sharing this information has to be with the user's consent. So he also believes that the blockchain has, a tremendous power to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse by providing auditability, timestamp, and immutability. Now, it's pretty clear that Charles is trying to find a healthy middle ground with regulations and the sort of core basic principles that we inherited from Bitcoin. Now, it's pretty clear going through the document that there is a permeability to regulation, but you can't satisfy every jurisdiction in the world. So what you've got to do is establish what is the acceptable limit of external incursions into our sort of Cardano space. The technology. Now, the research by the IOHK team resulted in a product of two collections of protocols, a two-layer blockchain construction. Now, the accounting of the value of the complex calculation with a cryptocurrency based on proof of stake is in the Cardano settlement layer, known as CCL, if you ever see it written. And it's separated into one layer on its own. Then you've got this other layer of protocols executed in the Cardano computation layer, and you'll see that written as CCL. Now, in the Cardano community, we can enjoy better performance and a better evolution for change as a result of a blockchain with two processing layers with modular design of its components. Now, Charles said it was difficult to choose Haskell for the development of the protocol, since in the world of functional languages, there is actually quite a wide range of options, but Haskell was the final decision for various technical reasons. The IOHK team developed Plutus, both as a general purpose smart contract language and also as a special purpose DSL for interoperability. Now, Plutus is a functional language written based on Haskell concepts, which can be used to write custom transaction scripts. As for the signature cryptography, it uses the, if you care, ED25519 elliptic curve. That sounds like something from Rick and Morty, right?
Tonight, I do that thing I want to do with the curve thing.
But anyway, in the future, it's planned to integrate resistant signatures to quantum computers when that happens. Now, Cardano has taken a pragmatic approach to address multi-asset accounting. The UTXO, the unspent transaction output model, to allow tracking of a very large state of unspent output. As for security, the document says that the final design adds trusted hardware security modules, or HSM, as the protocol stack, which provide massive performance improvements without security concern beyond relying on the vendor. And with the use of through-sealed glass proofs, or SGP, HSM can provide assurances that data can be verified and then destroyed without being copied or leaked to malicious kind of outsiders. It's mentioned that the scalability for Cardano and its layer 1 is favored by its consensus algorithm, since Ouroboros allows a decentralized way of choosing a quorum of consensus nodes, being able to apply similar techniques for network propagation, and also for sharding the blockchain itself into sort of unique partitions. He will refer to interoperability with open questions such as what systems, what standards, entities, and protocols should be targeted to ensure there is like a reasonable certainty of interoperability. And can these bridges be federated or decentralized? Like exchanges, will they become central points of failure for hackers, malicious owners, or overzealous regulators? Now, Charles says value can't always flow freely in the legacy world. Embargoes, sanctions, capital control, and legal actions could freeze assets. To be interoperable, you can't create an always open exhaust valve for value to leak. Once tokenized, the value should behave like a single object. The challenge in the legacy interop when it comes to tokenized value is that the assumption of trust, trustworthiness, and auditability change as the tokens flow between ledgers. Now, moving from the legacy world to the digital ledgers, interoperability becomes much simpler, as each ledger has a network protocol, communication standards, and security assumptions about its respected consensus algorithm, and they can be quantified quite easily. The privacy. Now, if you got your head screwed on, you can sit on a lavatory correctly, you will know that Cardano is not the same as Monero, and it doesn't pretend to even have the same kind of philosophy. Its transparency design in the ledger book that allows reading all transactions has a pseudo-anonymous character. So even more so, due to its proof of stake design, all funds in a wallet can be read from knowing the staking key, but without knowing who owns it, since on-chain personal data isn't recorded. Now, Charles acknowledges that culturally, in the crypto space at least, government action is viewed as corrupt, inept, or ineffective. But Charles understands that this narrative is a false dichotomy caused by a lack of imagination. He argues that the reality is that most users aren't really concerned with existing rules for markets, but rather are concerned with sudden rule changes to benefit one or more players. They worry about the lack of transparency about who gets special privileges and where. So he says a distinction must be made between individual and market rights. And since cryptocurrencies have a global reach, rights must be as user-orientated as possible. He believes that privacy should be reasonable and under the control of the user, not the gatekeeper. The flow of value must have no restrictions. The security should not be subject to sudden seizure without consent. He also argues that ownership and source of funds often depend on, sort of KYC rules, know your customer. When a money service, a business such as a bank or money exchange, opens an account for a new customer, they are usually required to collect all that sort of basic data about the customer and where they acquired their funds from. Decentralization. In IOHK, they admit that total decentralization is impossible and maybe even counterproductive. However, they believe that certain factors can be encouraged to produce a more sort of balanced system. They understand that while centralized custody of crowd sale funds allows for quick and agile development of a protocol during the early days, funding must be diversified. And that is why it's been decided to integrate a treasury system into Cardano. They claim that roadmap decisions cannot be centralized to a set of developers. So there must be a blockchain-based method for proposing, vetting, and enacting changes to the protocol. And that's why they intend to implement a formal process to submit Cardano improvement proposals through a system coordinated by the CSL itself. So they're known as SIPs now. Regarding the transparency of the product, the document proposes Cardano Foundation as the final auditor of IOHK's work in the periodic review of the source code contained in the Cardano GitHub and the review of all Cardano documentation in general. Now, the document instructs, if you take a look at this, IOHK to submit regular and timely reports to the Foundation for review, and the Foundation will in turn publish development monitoring report for the Cardano Treasury at least quarterly. And so, FYI, we can't find those published periodic reports. They say that the incentives behind Cardano maintenance should be directly aligned with the aggregate desires of all users. A cabal of specialized actors that are independent of the will of the larger community cannot be allowed to emerge. So they believe that the Ouroboros protocol offers that elegant solution. Final words. Now, as we said at the beginning of the article, the document we're talking about doesn't seem to be either a white paper nor is it a manifesto. It doesn't contain information with all the technicalities to be a white paper. It doesn't even mention that 45 billion is the total supply. And it also doesn't seem to contain any sort of definite policy exclamations, or not enough to be a manifesto at least. And beyond its framework, this essay outlines the idea that the author, Charles Hoskinson, wanted to express about his vision and mission in developing his blockchain project. So that brings us to the end of this article today. Remember, it can be found in print online as usual on the AdaPulse website, along with all the other articles we don't get a chance to make videos for. And do remember to click the like button, hit subscribe, and get the bell button for the notifications, and share far and wide. Remember, we want to reach as many people as possible. But I'm Josh from ATM Stake Pool, your presenter for AdaPulse for today, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.